Welcome back to another reading and correcting with me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. These are where I read a chapter from one of my stories and correct it as I go. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. And if you are looking to support me, that is, on my Patreon. Today we are doing chapter 68 of Breaking Step. Who needs to recharge? Jackal asked as Tibs healed him. The first fight of the boss room had taken a toll again, but mostly on Jackals. The creatures had focused their attention on him almost to the almost complete exclusion of the others. Those who hadn't had done so to keep anyone from coming to the fighter's help. Maz and Don had been the most successful ones, but the attacks had also bled off onto Jackal, so that what Tibs was healing was almost equally caused by his friends. I'm good, Maz replied. I will last this coming battle, Kumdar said, and so long as we take the time for Tibs to assist in recharging me afterward, I will continue to be fine. You need to carry amulets, Jackal said. Should you follow that same advice? I'm a fighter. I don't have time for that sorcerer stuff. And I am a cleric. Darkness will provide me with what I need. Then why are you letting Tibs here help you? Mez asked. Because as someone who has spoken with darkness, he too follows its will. Someone's becoming good at justifying, Jekyll said, carefully moving his newly healed arm. I have not become anything. Kumdar replied smugly, and Tib chuckled at the admission. Don, Jekyll called. Don! What? The sorcerer looked away from the dragon, which had taken so much of his attention he hadn't participated in ribbing Kumdar. I asked, how's your reserve? Oh, I'm fine, he replied distractedly, looking at the dragon again. I haven't seen Tibs help you in this run. Jekyll sighed. Don, any chance you can stop your mind from wandering? It isn't wandering, the sorcerer replied. The path on it is well marked. Then how about you take the path that takes you back to us? Jekyll asked. The glance Don gave him was filled with annoyance, which vanished as he looked at the others watching him. I'm sorry. What are we discussing? Tibbs hasn't helped you recharge, Jekyll said. Of course not. The reserve in this herb can easily last me through this floor a dozen times. A dozen times over. Don't give Ganny a challenge, Tibbs warned. She snorted. I don't care about Dawn. It's Jackal who's getting all my attention this time. I think we've noticed, Tibbs replied darkly. Jackal chuckled. Dawn is safe, isn't he? Angering the dungeon might be among the least wise thing you have done, Kavdar stated. I'm not angry at him, Stowe replied. Ganny is. Is Don sure he doesn't want me to change the color of his robe? He just has to put in the cash by the entrance. Stowe wants to make sure you're okay with the robe as it is. Don chuckled. As I said when he changed it so I could sense the essence it contained, I am fine with it. It's going to be simple to have a seamstress add highlights when I decide on them. I checked, and the robe sealing enchantment won't undo that. Tibbs focused on Jackal again to confirm he was fully hid. You keep getting Ganny angry, and this is just going to get worse. The fighter grinned. I know! So, Mez said, is this something to add to the list of things we can threaten to tell Krosef when you annoy us? How is there anything left on that list? Don asked. Doesn't he annoy you daily, and you've had to tell it all to his men? It seems, the clerk replied, sounding perplexed, that we have grown accustomed to Jackal's eccentric ways. How can anyone get used to that? The sorcerer demanded. Give it time, Jekyll said, amused, and you're going to love me just as much as they do. We don't love you, Mez said. We tolerate you. Don looked at Tibbs. How about we disarm the next trap, instead of getting drawn into what I'm sure will be a deep and philosophical discussion? But you love me, right, Tibbs? Jekyll asked, as he followed Don to the columns. Ask me again if you survived the room. Didn't you want one of them to work with me this time? Don shook his head. I can afford a mistake and the cost of another fight before the dragon. We have time for another fight, Jekyll said, if it comes to that. What are you planning? Tibs asked. Don shook his head, pointing up. Tibs took position, and in unison they disarmed the trigger. Again, he had added an extra step to the second one, which made them more alert on the last one, so that while how the speed at which the lock moved changed, proved challenging, it didn't cause them to trigger it. You run off to punch it, Tibs warned Jekyll, and I'm letting you hit the wall each time it knocks you into it. I would never think to abandon my team just to get a few hits in on my own, Jekyll said with pride, the words glowing. Tibs glared. Well, not a second time. Only a second time in this room, Tibs felt like pointing out. We must. Don started in the silence, then closed his mouth and shook his head. He looked at Jekyll for instructions. Tibs, Commodore, and me rush it, the fighter said. You and Mez hit it with everything you have. See if you can come up with something that gets through its protection. When the wave starts, thin it as much as possible before it reaches us. This is a different line. Don looked like he wanted to say something, but finally nodded, and they faced the dragon. Now, Jekyll ordered. Tibs ran, etching a spear of dew-filled water. It exploded into shards over the scale, but only left scratches on them. He had his ice sword and shield form by the time he had to jump over the large pause pipe. The slash at it hardly left a mark, so a filigree of fade didn't help. Again, the dragon focused on Jackal, mixing swipe with attempts at smashing him under a paw. Tibs iced a front leg, but that shattered as the dragon moved to follow the fighter. He ran under the dragon, adding as much metal essence with filigree of dew to the blade. If swings weren't effective, it was time to see what earth-backed stabbing would do. Retreat! Don ordered, and Tibs changed direction. 2 steps later, the dragon roared, and essence in the wall shifted. Jekyll, and Commodore were by the sorcerer as lines of creatures ran to where they had been fighting. They had been fighting the dragon, passing each other and vanishing into the opposite doorway. What was Jekyll started as the doorways disappeared. Attack! Don ordered. Tibs spared the sorcerer a look before running at the dragon, dodging the paw that he ineffectually swung at reflexively, then was under the belly and stabbed. The sword didn't go in as deep as it should have, most of the essence dispersed by the golden shimmering, but it was more damage than Tibs had done before, even if the dragon didn't react to it. He made another sword and slammed it back in, and made another one. Retreat! This time they were by the sorcerer before the doorway finished forming, and the roars resounded off the wall. What's going on? Jekyll asked, as the creatures, plural, again ran out to where they had been fighting, not even looking at where they now stood. Not even those with spears looked away you know what? I don't need this. Looked away. A form of automated response, Don replied. I don't know what triggers it yet. Probably the damage we're inflicting. But its eyes will glow red, and it roars regardless of what else it's doing. The 2 serve to trigger the doorway, I think, but they happened each time. But why aren't they coming to fight us? Jekyll asked as the creatures entered the doorways. Be ready to attack, Don said, instead of answering. He ignored the fighter's glare. Now! He ordered once the last creature vanished. Tibs ran at the dragon again, putting aside the whys and focusing on killing it. He stabbed it with a 4th sword, then the dragon shifted position faster than Tibs expected, and a rear paw came down on him. He formed a metal spike around himself, then he was sent sliding as the dragon ripped it out of the ground and shook the paw. Fortunately, it was toward Mez, so that retreat! He was ready for the run. Why isn't it blowing fire? Mez asked, watching the creature run. Could be something it only does if we keep our distances. Our distance, Don said. Or it knows it was a waste of time, Jekyll offered. Don ordered the attack and they returned to the fight. Tibs added the etching that spread ice to his sword, and it took him 3 stabs, each time adding to the essence to it. Before enough survived the shimmering, it ate away at the dragon's life essence. It also took enough from Tibs. He could now sense the dip in his unending reserve. As he let go of the 7th sword, the scales glowed red, and the essence within the dragon changed. Retreat! He yelled, running out from under it, just before Dawn yelled the same. This is going to be different. The light flashed as he reached Dawn and had them rubbing their eyes. He turned and watched in awe as the glowing dragon expanded, broke into 8 balls of essence, and reformed into 8 smaller dragons, each without injuries. That's not fair, Jekyll yelled as the dragons shook themselves. All the damage we inflicted is... With a unified roar, the dragon rushed them. Tim set an etching of an etched ice spear as he moved away from his team, and the dragon he targeted launched itself into the air, spreading its wing. Others were taking off in response to being attacked. It flew around a column and came out of the other side, more open and essence pooling there. Tibbs exerted his will over the essence and accomplished nothing as it ignited and the fireball came at him. He threw himself aside and the fireball splashed on the floor as if it was water. He cursed that some fell on him and burned. Light shot out of a dragon's mouth as Tibbs doused the fire, sticking with it to him with far more water than it should have needed. His thoughts of coming to Mez's help were interrupted as the fire-breathing dragon dove at him. He dodged it, then slammed it down with a column of air as it started to go up. He threw the stone, or he grew the stone around. I don't need that. He grew stone around its leg to hold it in place and form an ice sword, then had to jump aside as it spat a ball of fire at him. He had to jump again, its long neck letting it keep targeting him as he moved about, approaching. When he was in reach, he swung as hard as he could, adding earth to his arm, then nearly fell as it cut through the neck with far more ease than Tibbs expected. The head rolled away as he regained his footing, then it and the body crumbled into rubble. Tibbs, Don called, I need help. You know what? He ran to the sorcerer, doing a count. 6 dragon remained, each airborne. One spewed corruption at Kumdar, who... We're tired of that flip happening. Who made a wall of darkness that survived long enough for him to no longer be in the way when it failed. He sensed Don trying to wrench the corruption away, but with the same result Tibbs had achieved with the fire. The sorcerer's pointing to a dragon flying above all the others as it opened its maw and blasted one of its compatriots with purity, healing it. We have to kill that one, Don said. They're vulnerable to their opposed element, but that one, he pointed to the dragon attacking Kumdar with corruption, will break off to intercept my attacks each time. They're immune to their own elements? Just about. If we attack from multiple directions, one of us will get a hit through. Tibbs hurried through the room, blasting the dragon breathing earth on Jackal apart with a whirlwind. Then he turned. When he turned, the corruption dragon was nimbly catching each blast Dawn sent at the purity one. Tibbs blasted it with raw corruption essence, counting on strength to make up for the lack of form to it. The impact sent it against the wall, and Tibbs kept it going until it had melted to nothing. Then he switched to purity and needed a few tries to hit the corruption dragon as it darted around. Then its rubble fell to the floor. The ground shook and Tibbs turned in time to watch slabs of stone fly at the dragon diving at Jackal on his knee, hand on the floor. Below that, light and darkness flashed, and the darkness swallowed it. The dragon crashing next to the fighter was the last sound in the room. Jackal downed a healing potion before Tibbs reached him. Is everyone alive? He asked. Only those on our team, Mez replied. Good enough for me. The fighter let himself fall on it to his side. I'm taking a nap. A click and a rumble felt through the ground had him on his feet. The back wall split open, revealing a chest, and behind it, the top of a stairwell. Right, Jekyll said tiredly. We won. I'll take the fact that he isn't jumping with joy at it as a victory, Kenny said. Jekyll looked around. Tibs, check the chest. The rest of us gather the coin or whatever the dragons left behind. Then we're going down. I want to see that fourth floor before heading out. Are you okay? Tibbs asked. I'm fine, the fighter said, the words glowing. Really, I am. He added, the words still glowing. I'm just in a hurry to rub in Quigg's face that we reached the fourth floor before him. And collect that gold? Yeah, that too. Tibbs didn't press. Whatever was bothering Jackal wasn't physical. The potion had put his essence back in its place. The chest wasn't trapped. It had a bow like Mez, but containing metal essence. A sword containing so much of the same, Tibbs was reluctant to touch it, but it did nothing when he pulled it out. The green sorcerer's robe was next, then... Dawn, he called on seeing the book that had been under it. It too had essence woven through it, and that he wasn't touching. The sorcerer took it out without hesitation, then flipped pages. It's blank. Why would Stowe put a blank book woven with essence as loot? More importantly, Don mused, why such a book in a boss chest? Can you ask them what it is? Or if this is something they can talk about? The enchantment lets it record knowledge, Stowe said. Stowe, Kenny complained. What? They have it. What's the harm in me telling them? Telling Tibbs, you mean? She countered. Part of this is to get them to work out some of the reasons you include items, not to give all the answers. I haven't given them all the answers, Stowe replied, miffed. They don't know, it just needs to be focused on with the information they want recorded for it to work. Kenny sighed. He wasn't supposed to tell us, Tibbs said, amused, but he let it slip that it'll record knowledge you focus on it. How much can it hold? Dawn asked, flipping through the pages. I don't know, Tibbs said, sounding defeated. Mine essence is more complicated than the others to work with. He doesn't know, Tibbs said. Is that important? Dawn stared at Tibbs. Do you know what the most hardiest thing a sorcerer or any scholar has to do? Read, Tibbs replied flatly. The opposite. Right. Taking the idea we have, having to translate them into something words can express. It's like trying to explain the elements. But I have to do that with every word, not just a few. Academies have archives filled with books no one understands because the sorcerer couldn't be bothered to properly document what their research entailed. With something like this, all I have to do is pause long enough to focus my thoughts on it, and I can get back to my work. So this is important to you, Jekyll asked. Of course, but what are you doing? Jekyll asked as the fighter snatched the book out of his hand. He slipped it into the much smaller pouch, making sure the guild doesn't screw you over for this. Tibbs looked away. The weave that was part of the pouch did something that let the larger book in that gave him a headache if he paid too much attention. Don rubbed his temple. That will never look right. Tibbs confirmed there was no hidden compartment at the bottom of the chest, then headed for the stairs and froze in place on reaching the bottom and seeing the vista. Wow, Jekyll whispered. That is an understatement, Don said, awed. Tibbs didn't understand what he saw. Where he'd expected a room or a hall, it was open. Open as in he was looking outside at a city's rooftop with light coming from a pale sun that was most of the way through the afternoon. Then how far the roofs were registered, as well as the stairs going down the side of the opening in the cliff. How is a city done here? Mez asked. He looked at Tibbs, who only had one reaction. Stowe? Remember when I said we found something while working on the fourth floor? It was when I made all the items for you and for your team. Tibbs nodded. This is it. I made the stairs first, and as I pushed them down, Suddenly, I became aware of all this. I don't know how to explain it. I think of it as discovering you have a third arm attached to your back, but it's not new. As soon as you realize it's there, you also realize you know all the things you can do with it, as if you had always known. I know nearly everything about this city, and I didn't have to use any essence for that. I mean, it has essence for me to use. You didn't make this? Tips had trouble understanding how that could be. No. Then who did? No idea. There are no ways in or out except the stairs I made. Ganny doesn't know? Sorry, Tibbs, she said. No one ever said anything about this. How are we supposed to clear this floor? He asked. How could they go through every building in half a day? Even a full day couldn't be enough. Here, Stowe said, clearing the floor isn't so much doing his room, but finding the boss room. Ganny has clues all over the place to help, but even without them, you'll eventually find it since you don't have to go over the rooms you already checked on your next run. And this is where things get interesting. Did you notice how I said I know nearly everything about this floor? There are rooms here I have no idea what they are. How can you not know what they are? This is all you, isn't it? Again, I can't explain it. There's there. They're there, and I can sort of make use of them, but the one where I tried to do something special sort of went away. I mean, the structure is still there, but inside it is strange. Tibbs looked at his friends, watching him expectantly. Behind them was the alcove where the doorway waited to be activated. I'll tell you what he said once we're at the inn. He rubbed his temple. I need a drink. And that concludes chapter 68 of Breaking Step. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next chapter is going to be up, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to listen to this story as well as the other two in the series, they are up for free on Royal Road. If you want to read ahead of that and support me in the process, that is on my Patreon. We are about 20 chapters ahead. And if you're looking to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. The links are in the notes, and with that, I shall wish you a good day.